Hello, everyone. It's good to have you here tonight. We'll begin in just a few minutes, so grab some water, a snack, or whatever you need for our time together as we hear from Vicki Elliott. We are so glad you could all join us for our Mental Health Monday speaker series. The event tonight will be recorded right up to the Q&A. At that time, the recording will stop. Being that this is a Zoom meeting, it will be good to see each other's faces and hear from one another. But please use the button on your screen to mute your mic during the presentation. If you have questions during the event, you can submit them one of three ways. Place your question in the chat section. Use the raise hand functionality during the Q&A session. And when you are called on, remember to unmute. If you would like to remain anonymous, send your question to Teresa Delata privately, and she will submit your question anonymously. You do this by clicking the chat button, click the blue Everyone button after 2, and scroll down to Teresa Delata. I'm Jean Mills, a Mental Health Monday committee member. Mental Health Monday is a collaborative ministry between St. Joan of Arc Catholic Church and Bethlehem Lutheran Church, Twin Cities. Our mission is to offer support for individuals living with mental illness, their families, friends, and people working in the mental health field by providing resources, education, and social interaction. Our theme for 2021 is Hope for the Journey. I'd like to begin our evening with a prayer that has helped me through some difficult times. It's from Thomas Merton, the American Trappist writer, theologian, scholar, and poet. So take a couple of breaths to settle in. Close your eyes if you'd like. This is the prayer of trust and confidence. My Lord God, I have no idea where I am going. I do not see the road ahead of me. I cannot know for certain where it will end, nor do I really know myself. And the fact that I think that I am following your will does not mean that I am actually doing so. But I believe that the desire to please you does in fact please you. And I hope I have that desire in all that I am doing. I hope that I will never do anything apart from that desire. And I know if I do this, you will lead me by the right road, though I may know nothing about it. Therefore, will I trust you always, though I may seem to be lost and in the shadow of death. I will not fear, for you are ever with me, and you will never leave me to face my perils alone.
Thank you, Jean. Hello and good evening. I'm Diane Warbeck, Director of Congregational Care at Bethlehem Lutheran Church. And tonight we are going to hear from Vicki Elliott, the Director of Mental Health Connect. Vicki will speak until about 7:30. So anytime between now and then, please put your questions in the chat room and they will be answered at the completion of her talk. Vicki is the Director of Mental Health Connect, and she's been with us since fall of 2019. She is a mom to 3 and is personally familiar with the need to care for our own mental health. Mental health solutions and resources are a passion for her after losing her son cold to mental health related issues in 2018. Please join us as she shares her personal story of loss, pain, and deep grief, and how she survived and has made it through that process. The conversation will also help us understand why grief is so complicated, why it lasts so long, and seems to take on a winding path. Without further ado, Vicki, welcome, and we are thrilled that you are here.
Thank you. Thanks for the introduction, and that prayer, Jean, was quite appropriate for what I'm going to be talking about tonight. If you would have asked me 3 years ago, would I be sitting in front of all of you talking about grief and mental health and loss? There's no way. So that prayer was right on. We have to trust and follow the path and see what happens. Well, tonight is for anyone that has experienced grief and maybe is experiencing grief right now, has lost a child at any age, and who has supported someone through a mental health crisis. I'm going to share my screen and hopefully this works. Can you see okay? Yes, good. So the title of my presentation tonight is Tangled Up in Grief. And thank you, first of all, for being here tonight. I know there's a lot of things that we could be doing tonight. For instance, Netflix might be on your list of things to do in the evening. But if you have experienced grief or you know someone else who has, and I believe that we all have had a grief experience in our lives, you are in the right place. I'm glad you chose the Monday Night Mental Health series. So tonight, I'm going to tell you about my #1, top of the list, intense grief experience. And I have Kleenexes just in case, because I will cry. #2, we're going to talk about feelings that are involved with grief, and some of them are very surprising. #3, I'm going to talk about some traps that you can fall into with grief and how to watch out for those. #4, I'm going to talk about the stages of grief. And we'll talk about what those stages really look like. #5, we're going to go on to how do we handle grief? Do we just deal with it? Do we forget about it? Do we move through it? How do we get through it? And last, we're going to talk about resources, support, and hope. So first of all, this is a definition of grief. It is a normal, and I wanted to underline that, a normal process of reacting to any kind of a loss. So it can be a physical loss, like a death. It can be a social loss, like a divorce, occupational, such as a job loss. It's an emotional reaction of grief, can include anger, guilt, anxiety, sadness, and despair. Grief happens to everyone, and it can be an emotional response from also the loss of a friendship, a retirement. If you've ever lost a pet, that grief associated with the loss of a pet is great. It can be from a health diagnosis, and it can also be when you're moving. All of those things, even though there might be something positive on the other side with some of these losses, it's still a change and you're still losing things. So right now in the world, we're all going through something called collective grief. And it's the grief of the loss of our pre-COVID life. And even though you might be really happy with your COVID life right now, I know a lot of people are enjoying being at home and working at home and being with their families, but we still have probably grieved at some time over the last year of the loss of this life that we had, because we didn't see this coming and we didn't know that our life was going to be changing in drastic ways. There's so many different kinds of grief that I could do a whole presentation just on the types of grief, but I'm not going to get into that tonight. But what I do want to point out before I dig into my story is that grief is a reflection of what we love. But even that can get confusing sometimes. So these are photos of my now 27-year-old son, Cole. And in these pictures, down at the bottom right, he is 4 years old, all the way up to 24 years old. And sadly, that is where his life here on earth ended at 24. Cole struggled with mental illness most of his life, with his first diagnosis at just 4 years old. So many years of therapy that we went through. I think when he was 4 and 5 years old, we were going to therapy 3 days a week. We had a really difficult time finding resources for him at each stage of his life. And challenges with school, schoolwork, teachers, friends, fitting in. We had behavioral issues, legal issues, and finally addiction issues. Every one of these steps and these stages that we went through, I realize now was met with grief. Probably not only on my part, but on his part as well. I didn't know it at the time, but I look back, and each of those stages that we went through, we were losing something. So for instance, when he was 4 years old, his day care provider caught me as I was picking him up one day and told me that I needed to get Cole tested. Something was wrong with him. And all I could think of is what could possibly be wrong with look at this cute little 4-year-old little boy. He was just high spirited and he was just busy, but we did get him tested. When he was in first grade, his teacher called me at work one day and said that we needed to get him on meds right away or he was not welcome back in the classroom. He was too disruptive. When he was 12 years old, he sat us down and told us that he needed more freedom and he wanted to make his own choices. When I attended school conferences and was met with disappointed teachers because he wasn't performing up to standards, I grieved. Cole was ultimately diagnosed with ADHD, learning disabilities, a mood disorder, anxiety, depression, and finally, when he was 19 years old, he was diagnosed with bipolar disorder. I had to accept at each of these stages that Cole was changing. He was not following the path that I had set out for him. Thus, I needed to change too, and that was probably harder for me to change. I had to change my plan and keep my disappointment in check and help him stay on track. Reroute my constant planning and preparing for the life that I had prepared for him, which wasn't going to work out. As parents, sometimes we do that, right? I mean, we have this baby and we already have big plans for them. And we have to, even if you don't have mental illness, you have to reroute a lot of times to adjust to your child. Well, the grief was about to get worse when we had to ask him to move out at 19 because he was using drugs. And we had 2 other younger children at home. And it crushed me. I can tell you, when I received calls from his roommates that they just couldn't live with him anymore because of his behavior and his drug use, it broke my heart. When I got the call that he'd overdosed, again, I was lost. See, most parents feel like these are situations you can't share with anyone. There are a few reasons why this happens, and I know that now a little better. One is the obvious. You're embarrassed and you wonder if you did something wrong. and you hope you can quickly remedy it and get back on track. Number 2, you're in complete shock and have no idea where you're going to turn. And you don't think there could be possibly anyone else who has gone through this experience. Number 3, you're overwhelmed and you're working really hard to not fall apart. And last, you secretly hope that this will be resolved very soon and things will get back on track. At the beginning of April 2018, Cole finally got into a treatment program here in the Twin Cities. He was there for 2 weeks, seemed to be doing well when we visited him. We were very hopeful that this would set him on a better path. He seemed like he was ready for change. He was missing his friends. He said he missed his old life. He missed connection with his family. But after a couple of weeks at treatment, he got really, really sick. And he got so sick to the point where he couldn't walk. At that point at the treatment center, they asked him to leave treatment because he couldn't get to his group and his therapy unassisted. He had asked for a wheelchair. He asked for a cane, and they wouldn't give it to him. So they proceeded to transport him 2 hours back up to Duluth, dropped him off at the curb of an apartment that he no longer rented anymore. And within 48 hours, Cole would call 911. Sorry. On April 26th, 2018, I received a message from a friend of Cole's. She texted me and said, "Hey, I just wanted to touch base with you. Did Cole call you?" Cole was in the hospital with a MRSA infection. And I don't know if you know what MRSA is, but I had never heard of it before that day. It's a staph infection, a blood staph infection. We drove up there immediately and wanted to find out what was going on. I didn't know what was going on. I had no idea until I got to the hospital. And the nurse pulled me out in the hall and said, "Are you mom?" And I said, "Yes." She said, "Well, I got to talk to you. This is not looking good." We would spend 2 weeks with him in the hospital, praying, crying, begging, pleading, holding his hand, sleeping in very uncomfortable places, asking questions, getting to know the doctors and nurses, and answering a lot of texts from concerned family and friends. It seemed like we had been there for a very long time. It seemed like it was months. And in fact, the doctors and nurses were telling us that he would be in the hospital for a very long time. So we started looking into getting apartments up in Duluth because we knew we were going to be up there a lot and we needed to have some place to stay. But on May 8th, 2018, Cole would take his last breath. The grief washed over me. All the years, all the loss, all the pain, all the work, all the adjusting, and all the love. The pain I felt that day was intense. It was not only emotional, but it was a physical pain. And again, I was in shock. Even though I knew with drug addiction, with mental illness, that this was a possibility, I wasn't prepared. All those feelings, those unexpected feelings, and all the feelings that I wasn't prepared for. And there is absolutely no way to prepare yourself for grief. And speaking of feelings, with grief, there are so many feelings. I will tell you, I had been working with a therapist prior to Cole getting sick and going into the hospital because I knew that there was a possibility that if he continued his lifestyle, that he wasn't going to make it. And so I was already working with somebody that was helping me kind of accept some of those things. And even though I had been working on it, I still could have never anticipated the feelings that I had when it actually happened. Some of the feelings you would expect and you're familiar with, and you recognize. You would think of being sad or feeling empty, scared, or lonely. But there are so many unexpected feelings, like guilt, relief. If you've been caring for someone for a long time and they've been very, very sick, there might be a little feeling of relief. Physical pain. I didn't realize that I would actually have a real broken heart. It felt like I couldn't breathe. It felt like my heart was shattered. I didn't know about that. Another unexpected emotion is anger. Angry that that person left, that it had to change, that things were different. And all of the feelings are different for everyone. Sometimes completely opposite feelings can happen all at the same time. I do not know how that works. I have no idea. I do remember though, I was with a friend and I remember we were talking and I remember I was smiling. And then it all of a sudden clicked into my head, how can I be smiling when I am so horribly sad inside? I don't understand how this works. I've also had conflicting feelings of anger and love all at the same time. Loving him and angry that he left. I don't know. I encourage you to feel all the feels. I was so afraid to feel those feelings. I was afraid to let them out. I was afraid to what would happen. But I also knew that I had to. I had to move through them. Because on the other side is safety, and those feelings start to become a little bit familiar. The next thing I want to go over are traps, or I guess I like to call them quicksand. And I fell into quite a few of these. One at the top of the list is taking care of other people. So watch out for these traps. Not only can they derail you and distract you, but they actually can make your grief journey worse. So one of the things is everyone around you is grieving when there's a loss. But we are no good to anyone until we're back on track, or until we're on stable ground, at least, until we're out of the quicksand. So please, I encourage people to take care of yourself first before you take care of others. Trying to make people feel comfortable. This is, we do this all the time. Somebody will ask you, how are you doing? Oh, I'm doing fine. I encourage you not to worry about who you're talking to and trying to make them feel comfortable. Tell them how you're feeling. I'm not great, but I'm working on it. Or we're struggling. It's been pretty bad, but we're gonna get there. I even remember at Cole's funeral, people saying, how are you? And it's almost automatic, right? I think I'm okay. I'm not okay. Thinking you should be over it by now. Oh, we hear things like, oh, I heard, oh gosh, you're back at work already? Or gosh, you're back at work, you're not back to work yet? So you get over it. You don't ever get over it, but don't worry about the timeline, which is the next one. Your timeline is your timeline. Take your time, do what you need to do. Don't worry about comments from other people. If you need to do something, do it. If you need to go out, go out. If you don't want to, don't. There are no timelines with grief, none. Another trap is guilt. The shoulda, coulda, wouldas can really get to you. And always remind yourself that you did what you could at the time with the tools that you had, and that is it. Nothing else. Comparing your grief to other people's grief. I found that this happens sometimes when I went to some grief groups. And It's impossible. You can't compare it. I could have the same exact thing happen with another one of my children, and I think I would have a different sort of response, because it has to do with the relationship that you have with that person or that thing that you're grieving. And it's like a thumbprint. Everyone is different. Every relationship, every experience is so different. You can't compare it. We do have things that we can talk about and we can share as feelings that we're having, but the experience is totally different. Getting stuck is a big one. I've seen this a lot, and it was one of the things that I knew I didn't want to do, because I had already been going through some therapy and we had talked about getting stuck. And so I knew this one, and I thought, I can't get stuck. I have to keep processing. I have to take all the time and do all the things. So one of the traps that I fell into, and I didn't list it here, but one of the things that I was stuck in is kind of getting stuck, but I thought, what if I forget? What if I let go of some of this grief and then I don't remember anything? What if I lose this little tiny bit of him that I have left? And that's my grief. That's the last thing I have left. But you won't forget. You will never forget. You will always have him. And that was the advice from my therapist. You have to let go. You have to keep moving. You're not going to forget, I promise. But just in case, I did spend a lot of time furiously journaling and writing everything down. And then I moved on. So do what you have to do. The last thing I would say that is a trap and a quicksand is not getting help. I think so many times we think, oh, it'll be okay. It'll get better. Everyone goes through this. Get the help that you need, whether a friend that you can just sit and cry with, a support group, a grief group, whatever you need. And I'll talk more about those support groups at the end. So you have all heard, I'm sure, about the stages of grief. There are books written about it. There are therapy practices that relate to the stages and helping you work through those. There are presentations all about the stages of grief. But I found that they don't go in order. Sometimes they skip steps. And sometimes they're actually on top of each other. I like to think about it, what it really looks like is more the picture on the right-hand side. It's more like a maze, rather than a path. It's twisted and you're tripping over it and you're falling and you're getting lost. You get lost for a while, but then you're surprised because you find a little nugget that helps you process. The good news is there is a way to the other side, but it does take some time. So how do you move forward in life while honoring your grief? I remember thinking, I'm not going to get through, I can't get through this. And how are my kids going to get through this? We can't do this. This is too hard, but it is possible. I love this quote. Faith is not the absence of fear, but the willingness to go on when fear is present. And of course we're afraid. Of course there's fear, but we have to go on. You will be scared. You will twist and move through the stages. It won't look like anything that you've ever seen before. Even if you've been through grief in the past, it may look different this time. Keep finding the right path. Keep being curious. Keep moving. Just keep wandering through the maze and things will show up. Which brings me how to move forward and through grief. We don't get over it. We don't forget about it. We don't just be quiet and hope things go back to normal. They don't. Grief lives with me now. It resides in my makeup, in my identity, and in my lived experience. I like to talk about how do we peacefully, inquisitively, and respectfully live with grief. Not avoid it, not fight with it, not be mad at it. Maybe for a little while, but then we move past that too. I am asked a lot, how did you get over it? How are you doing so well? What was your secret? Well, I always tell people, first of all, I'm not over it. There's not very many days where I don't cry. Does that mean I'm struggling? I think I'm doing pretty well, but I'm not over it. I'll never get over it. It has just become part of me. I didn't get out of bed for a week after Cole's death. My husband had to bring me smoothies and food up to my bedroom so that I would eat. It's a devastating event. I knew I had to figure out how to keep moving forward. I just wasn't positive how to do that. I had 2 other children that needed me. And my then 12-year-old son came into my bedroom one day and said, "Mom, you're not going to be one of those moms that just lays in bed for the rest of her life, are you?" I knew that I had to figure this out. I had work, I had family that needed me, I volunteer, and I needed me. So here's what I did. First of all, I prayed like I have never prayed before, desperately and boldly and every day and all day. I just prayed. I really didn't know what else to do. I didn't have any other ideas. I thought, well, I'll do this. After I prayed for a long, long, long time, many days, I decided I was going to get intentional about this. But in the beginning, I took really small baby steps. So first of all, I came downstairs and actually got my own glass of water. Then after a while, I did take a shower, which it had been a long time. Then I stepped out on the front porch. And then I went for a walk. And then a really big step, and I still remember this, I actually went for a walk with a friend, which means I had to talk and I had to listen. And I wasn't sure I was ready for that, but I went for it anyway because it was a friend who I knew she would have no expectations of me. Don't be afraid to go back. If you move a little forward and it's not working, step back. It's okay. Think about that maze. Sometimes you run into a wall and it's not right and you got to turn around and you got to backtrack. That's okay. I was open and honest. So I told people that I don't feel good. I don't want to do anything. I had family that was asking if they could come up and stay with us. And I said, absolutely not. I am not ready to have anyone else in my house. And I don't know if it just felt like at that point, I didn't have anything to lose. So telling people no felt okay. But I did remind people, please ask me later, because I bet I'll be ready later, but I am not ready now. Let people feel what they need to feel. Let them process, let them do their work, but you do your work and don't worry about caring for them. You need to care for you at that point. The other thing I had to do is I had to let people help me, which I didn't love, but they did want to be part of my journey and I did need help. So we had meals delivered to our house for an entire month. I got a message one day saying, "Do you want the meals to stop or should we continue them?" I said, "Yes. Oh my gosh, please don't stop them. I can't go to the grocery store. I can't even think about I can't cook it. No, please." And I found out my friends are amazing cooks. So it worked out really good, actually. The last thing I did was to find a group, a therapist, friends. I knew that I needed to process this with somebody. And I tried a lot of things. I tried some grief groups that didn't work for me. I actually left that grief group feeling worse than when I went in. The sadness and the overwhelming stories were just too much for me at that point. I did find a grief group that specialized in people that had lost someone to addiction. And I found a place there. and a community that I could talk to and open up with. If you have family members, kids, spouses, help them find tools as well. I knew I needed all the resources and help. I had never been in this place before. So I knew I didn't want to get stuck. That was always in my mind. So I also had a therapist that I had been seeing prior to Cole's death, and she was amazing. That was the place where I could go and I could cry and sit on her couch, and she just listened, and she knew. The best thing that I found after all of this was a place to help others, to use the gifts that I was given. And yes, I do look at my grief process now as a gift. It took a while. The life experience I had, the resources that I had struggled to find, and the struggles that we went through as a family, I could use those to help others. It gives purpose to Cole's life. It allows him to live on through our work. And Mental Health Connect was exactly what we needed as a family when Cole was alive. And it just so happens to be exactly what I need now. I want to point out a few other things on the slide that are really, really good things to help you move forward and move through grief. But always try to look for the goodness. And I told somebody I had to start a little gratitude journal because I was really starting to get pretty bummed out every day. And I wasn't seeing anything positive in my life. So I would even write down things like, I have a cup of coffee this morning, and I am grateful for this cup of coffee. If that's all I could come up with, that was good enough. I'm really happy that I've been laying in this bed for a whole week. Even simple things, look around you and look for the good in your day, in your life, and it'll start to progress and it'll pick up speed. Again, I would encourage you feel all those feelings. I know they are terrible and they're scary, but it really is worth it to go through them. We already talked about some of these other ones. Self-care. I know it seems like it's not that important, but it really is. And care for yourself, do what you need, take a bath. I mean, we forget, right? We forget to drink water. We forget to go for a walk. We forget to take a bath. We forget that those things can be very healing for us. Quiet time. I had to move my body. I had to get out and walk. I had to stretch. Don't forget to move. And then last, don't forget to recognize all the growth you've been through. If you have to keep a journal, if you want to write it down, but don't forget to look back. And maybe if you forget, which we all do, ask someone that's close to you. Do you think I'm doing better? I remember asking people, how do you think I'm doing? How do I seem to you? Do I seem like I'm okay? And the last slide is some resources and some hope. So we're all different. And grief, like I said, is like a thumbprint. It is different every single time. Every experience is original. But there are certain things that we can share, and that's where you want to get together and use these resources. Step one, keep breathing. I found myself holding my breath a lot and not breathing. I was in shock. I was not thinking clearly. Keep breathing. And then number two, find support. Someone you can cry with, someone you can talk to, a safe place for someone to listen. Number one, Mental Health Connect. We have a navigator line that is text, call, email, and experienced navigators answer that phone. And if you need a resource, they would be my number one choice to go to. They are phenomenal, and they will spend hours researching a great resource for you, whatever it is that you need. And you don't need to know what you need. They will help you figure that out. The second one on the list, Brighter Days Grief Center. I'm sure many of you have heard of it. That is where I received some help. I belonged to a grief group that was just for people that had lost someone due to addiction. And it was a great group. We had all lost different people, a spouse, somebody lost a parent, somebody lost a brother, but we all could relate on that conversation of behaviors and addictions. My younger son, my 12-year-old son, also did a grief group through Fairview Grief Services, which is also now part of Brighter Days Grief Center. They just merged in the last few months. Great resources. Family Means is also, they have a website, it's called griefloss.org. And they also have some really wonderful grief resources. They also just merged maybe 2 years ago. It used to be Grief Loss, I think it was called the Grief Loss Institute, and they merged with Family Means a couple years ago. So they, great organization. Talk to a grief therapist. So find someone that specializes in grief and can help you walk through that and process what you're thinking and how to move forward. And you will get stuck, and how to get you unstuck. The Grief Guru, thegriefguru.com. She is actually a friend of mine, and she lost her oldest son exactly 2 months after I lost Cole. So my son died May 8th, and her son died from an accidental drug overdose on July 8th, 2018. We have connected over the loss of our children, and she helps. She has a whole system, a whole program. She does public speaking. And we are lucky enough to have her at Mental Health Connect for our Breakfast of Hope on May 20th at 8:30 a.m. She's going to be talking about her story and her system for going through grief and how she did it. She's an amazing speaker. Also, your primary care doctor, your friends, and your church are great resources for finding help and support and a listening ear. And that is the end of the information I have. I know there's probably a lot of questions. I feel like this could have been 6 different presentations. I could have done something on mental health, on grief, on my kids and how they process grief. I could have talked about all sorts of things. But in summary, this is a grief conversation.
Well, thank you, Vicki. We appreciate you sharing your story and inspiring us tonight. We're going to show a few informational slides before we stop recording, and then we're going to take questions once the recording has stopped to respect people's privacy and not have it recorded. So first, we're gonna, if you want to sign up for the Mental Health Monday list, email list, you can go to, sorry, my Google thinks I'm talking to it. You can sign up with www.mentalhealthconnect.org/MHMS sign up. And it's also just been put in the chat. Vicki, are you still sharing your screen? No? Okay. Whose screen is up?
It says it's Jennifer's screen.
Okay.
Is it not the correct slide?
Nope, it's your desktop showing everything.
The joys. Let me try it again.
Okay, so here's the slide for, again, that email address or sign up thing has been put in the in the chat. And that's for our next programs so that you can get notified in advance and join us. We meet the second Monday of the month, except for July, August, and December. And our next upcoming event is going to be April 12th with Karen Ostromsky, a wellness coach. And she's going to present on moving from change to transformation. So we want you to join us for that. Again, that'll be virtual like this through Zoom. And you can get the link either by signing up with the Mental Health Connect.org sign up thing, or you can go to the Bethlehem Lutheran Twin Cities website or the St. Joan of Arc Catholic Communities website and click on the link to get that. And you can share that with your friends. Anybody's welcome to come. And then also, if you, again, as Vicki mentioned, the Navigator program that we have with Mental Health Connect, if you would, if you need confidential help, you can call, text, or email, and that information is also going to be put in the chat. There it is. And then if you are concerned about your mental health, just contact Mental Health Connect. Again, it's a confidential, non-judgmental, kind listening ear that you can direct you to resources that can help. And the first step is just contacting them. And they're available Monday through Friday, 8:30 to 5 p.m. And if they don't answer right away, they will get back to you. So make sure to leave a message. And then last, we got the NAMI suicide prevention hotline. So first, you can go to NAMIMN.org to find support groups or resources. And then the Suicide Prevention Lifeline is also available to anyone in a suicidal crisis or emotional distress. And that's 1-800-273-TALK. And so again, if you just want to visit the NAMI website, NAMIMN.org, you can get the resources for those support groups and other things. And then now we are going to stop recording, and then we're going to switch to the Q&A part of